Hey everyone, we're back again from Barca Football. Today we'll go straight into the topic that's on top of everybody's mind. One is obviously preseason. We just came back from a bunch of games in the United States. We played Milan, we played Arsenal, we played Real Madrid. Results were results, but and you can't really take preseason results that seriously, but we'll talk about the games and what we learned from them. But before that, we'll obviously talk a little bit about the news of the week, which is Ousmane Dembele leaving Barcelona.
Dembele is definitely, I would say, it's still a bad news, even though there's an argument here to be made that Barca, they'll be fine without Dembele because he is a great player, but, there's a lot of baggage there and there's a lot of hostility, I would even say, between him and the fans, which is mostly caused by his agent, but also because Dembele he is who he is.
So this is Ousmane Dembele, goals per 90 in the league over the last few seasons in Barca. What does this mean? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it somewhere in the middle? Or can we even make any assumption out of that?
I think it is somewhere down the middle, I would say. Obviously, Dembele is not a goal scorer. He's not a prolific goal scorer. Despite his excellent ball striking with both feet, he is not someone who will bag and, dozens of goals like Mbappe, for example. He's a different kind of player, and that reflects in the stats as well, as we can see here.
Are we going to miss him too much? Is it going to be a meaningful miss, which impacts our season, which impacts our performance? And second, across 7 years, there is the promise of Dembele, and then there is the reality of Dembele. Is this the promise of Dembele, or is this the reality of Dembele, what we are seeing on this graph?
Are we going to miss him? I think yes, but more so because Xavi's tactics have been so geared towards having a Dembele in the team that his departure might force Xavi to change things up quite drastically, because it's a very big difference when you have Dembele on the wings and you have Rafinha on the wings. The quality itself, there's a difference, no doubt about that. But Rafinha is a good player, but he's a different kind of player. So you cannot really play the same way if you have him or Dembele or Ferran Torres or Fati or even, Abde or Balde. They can serve the purpose. They can be similar in terms of execution, but at the end of the day, they are different players, and playing with them the same way you play with Dembele is not going to work. So this is the main aspect of his departure, is that Xavi will have to change things up.
So he's a prolific player, no questions on that. Outstanding skill set. But if you look at that shot conversion rate of 13% or 14% and the accuracy rate of about 47%, is it worth the trouble?
What we can see here is the inconsistency part. So he will take a lot of shots, and surprisingly, a lot of them are on target, which is good. Still, the conversion rate and just the accuracy, I don't think those are on a high enough level for Dembele to be a consistent goal-scoring threat. Now, you mentioned the goal involvement part. That's huge, because that's not necessarily goal or assist. That can be any other thing. It can be his progression, it can be his link-up, it can be just how he attacks space, there's a lot of things that go into that. And Dembele does a lot of things that don't necessarily directly impact the final product. They do on a scale, but he's not putting the finishing touches on it himself.
Assists, passing, chance creation. I think this is where Dembele really excels. And this is where I think we used him also very well. Like if you look at the number of assists, he broke the assist record and so on. So that's good stuff. But let's look at the numbers actually. So the pass completion rate, about 82%, which is at the 69th percentile of all players in La Liga. And then the cross completion rate of about 55. And then if you look into the minutes per assist, that's about 202 minutes per assist, right?
Obviously, we don't really have a player of his caliber now that he's left. Rafinha will take up that mantle. And Rafinha is pretty creative in his own right, especially in Barcelona's current dynamics, where you have two runners on the other side. So if you have Ferran Torres or Ansu Fati or even Balde or even Abde on the other side of the pitch making those runs, Rafinha is kind of the perfect profile. He's not a perfect player, but perfect profile, because he is the creative passer and he's one who's a left footer on the right side, which means that he will naturally tend to play those switches on the other side of the pitch into the runners. That's very important. The thing is, he won't be able to replicate Dembele's quality. So pure quality-wise, he's a step down. But profile-wise, he still fits the whole idea.
Dembele is definitely a player with a lot of flair, right? And we'll miss that for sure. That's the way football goes. We got to wish him the best, and he moves on, and the club moves on.
It's a shame because a lot more could have been made or achieved in his, what was it, 6 years, 7 years? I don't even know anymore. But it's a shame.
Preseason just ended, and we went to the States, and we had a few games. I'm hearing Arnau Martinez is back in the fray of back along with Fresneda, and then there's Cancelo, and then there's Bernardo Silva, and there's literally everybody in the world because it's Barcelona. So we'll see what happens. So I've taken two games which were of interest to me. One was with Madrid, and then with AC Milan, and those are the pass maps. Anything unique you see between the two games, or are you seeing the same thing?
So the first thing I would notice here is that Barca is still very, very much focused on their overload to isolate tactics. Now, in these instances, we see that with Real Madrid, that's the right side. The right side is more populated, more overloaded, and the left side is isolated. And versus Milan, it's the opposite. That very much depends on the profile players you have. So if you have someone like Balde playing and up high and making those overlapping runs, naturally you will tend to want to eject him into space, want to have him very high and very wide and attacking that space and making him isolated with whoever that is on the other side of the pitch. If you have someone like Rafinha, it can work as well. Obviously, Dembele used to be that guy. He used to be the isolated guy all the time. And it makes sense. We just looked at the stat as well. His dribbles, the way he attacks space, his pace, all of that trickery and flair is perfect for the overload to isolate tactic. And Balde, I feel, will kind of don the mantle now that Dembele is gone, because as good as Rafinha is in certain things, he's not Dembele when it comes to conquering space and running at players at full speed and then creating through such mechanisms.
Do you feel that with Madrid, they were a little bit circumspect and a little bit dropped deep, while with Milan, they were the usual high line right up to the center line?
That's a very good spot, actually. They are. The defensive lines are much deeper with Real Madrid. And that's also kind of the direct result of Madrid just being able to take the ball away from us and pinning us down for what was, I don't want to say majority of the game, but a big part of the match was actually Madrid attacking and Barca scrambling and then finding the opportunities and exploiting those chances really, really well. And there was some luck here. Let's not dance around that.
I'll need to explain this. So if you look at those two dotted lines, those define sections. So on the left-hand side, you have the Milan game. In the middle, you have the Real Madrid game. And on the right, you have the Arsenal game. That's how it's divided. And I've divided and I've tried to do a comparison in terms of positional attack. And within that, how many shots were there and what was the percentage of success across all the games that we have. So if you look into it, and in the Milan game, we had about 10 shots to, Milan's 6. In the game, we had 5 shots to Real Madrid's 14. And in Arsenal, we had 4 shots to about Arsenal's 12. Question, though, for a team like Barca, who has often prided itself in its positional play, looks like we were outpositioned by both Arteta and Real Madrid when it came down to it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, yes, we were kind of out-positioned, if that's the word here that I can use. But yeah, we were actually, because Arsenal, they are a team that has a much more stable structure, and a team that has much more stable idea, and a team that minimizes all the variances. What I mean by this is that they set the tempo and they don't rely on these external factors like lots of dueling, a lot of breaking the play and stuff like that, which Barca do still rely on. And that kind of decreases the level of control they can have over a match. Arsenal can control a match. Barca, much less so. Against Real Madrid, a similar thing. I think that we are not, leaps and bounds behind Real Madrid. We're not really, but this game showed that we, in the current state that we are, with our fitness included here and our preparations included, that we were not really ready to go full on and full power against Madrid just yet.
It feels like Ancelotti has a system. It feels like Arteta has a system, which is pretty much drilled in the way the team functions, in the way the team progresses the game. Do we really have a system, or is it all chaos ball?
We do have a system. I mean, Barca's identity is much more vertical at this point, and we have to face this. It's just very vertical. It's very different to what we used to. We do have a system, but that system may not be very optimal in this current stage. It is viable, sure, but not the most optimal one. Xavi likes to do certain things his way in every single week, every single match day. So these things that I've mentioned up above here, the +1 rule, triangles, wall passes, third man runs, deep carries, and overload to isolate, are just some of the things that I feel like we always see in Barca games. And I will mostly focus on the deeper phases, so build up play, because for a simple reason, Barca, as you said, are chaos ball. That is very true. And that's what people are mainly bring up when it comes to Barca's deficiencies. It's chaos ball. However, the build-up phase is the most stable phase of Barca's whole tactical identity, let's call it that way, because this is where we see most of their patterns, and let's call them robotic actions come to light. So in preseason, we saw teams press with one striker, two strikers, depends on the opposition way of dealing with these things. But let's say, for the sake of the argument, for example, I think it was Milan, they pressed with one striker, which means that one striker has to follow the ball here. And what Barca do is they maintain the center-back tandem here. And this is already the +1 rule in action, because you have two center-backs who are being covered by one striker, which means that we have the +1 here, and we have the option, the option to recycle play and bypass this one guy with only our center-backs. So now, this guy right here, the left center back, can receive the ball and he can run with it. And this means that this player up here, or these players, don't have to come near, they'll have to engage with the back line to establish this superiority, numerical superiority to the +1, because we already have the extra man in the back line who can progress. And this goes hand in hand with Xavi's deep carries. He loves for his players from the deep to, when they receive the ball, he loves for them to run with it. And that's what this +1 rule enables you. This player, when he receives the pass from this player, he can run with the ball forward. And what this does, carries are inherently very risky, because if this player who now has the ball up here, if he loses that ball, there's a big gap right behind him, which can be exploited. That's why this is risky. However, what carries also do, they force the opposition to abandon their initial areas to collapse on this player, because this player cannot be left alone. He's gaining territory, he's disrupting the whole defensive structure, and he needs to be collapsed upon, he needs to be stopped. And once that happens, space opens up in other areas of the pitch. So that's why carries are so important here. And Xavi loves his carries, because what also happens, if you have this guy a bit wider, let's say here, and he receives the ball right here, what will happen is the opposition has to move. They all have to move ball side. They have to go towards the ball carrier, which is on this left side. For the sake of the argument, is the left side. I'll just delete this real quick. And now suddenly you have all the players trying to occupy one side of the pitch, and you see what happens there. You have the isolation that Xavi wants on the other side. And now this player, all he has to do, which is not always simple, but he has to swap sides and access the isolated player on the other side of the pitch. So in this one sequence, we have seen how these deep carries and numerical superiority, the +1 rule, enables the other aspects of Xavi's identity. So that means that he will establish the +1 rule in the back line. He will eject his center backs on a deep carry. He will force the opposition to move accordingly, and he will create the isolation on the other side of the pitch. So this is all of that in one sequence is how Xavi loves to operate. But it's not the only thing, of course, because we still have the wall passes and third man runs. So this now is more of a 4-4-2, more traditional 4-4-2, where you have two players pressing. So what happens in this case, again, same thing. Now you have two strikers or two players pressing the back line, which means that Xavi doesn't have the +1. So what he does is he drops another player right there, as we saw De Jong, for example, against Real Madrid. And now you have 3 versus 2. And what happens next is the wall pass or the third man run, which means that if this player can access De Jong, all he has to do is lay the ball off to a third party. So the third player who is unmarked receives the ball. And we saw this countless times. The pivot dropping and laying off the ball to the side of the free man. For Xavi, it's all about that free man. How can we access the free man? Where is the free man? And this third man run or third man sequence or wall pass is initiated between 3 players. Obviously, one player on the tip of the triangle who lays the ball off to the free man. And that's how you access that free man on the side. And that's the essence of what Xavi likes to do. Again, this formation right here, as you can see as well, it's all about the triangles. Where do we see the triangles? We see them all over the pitch. We see them here. There's one triangle, triangle here, triangle there, triangle higher up the pitch. It's all about those triangles. Why? Simply put, the triangles allow Xavi much easier connectivity between his players. So it means that there's always an option for every player to receive the ball and have an option to pass the ball to in almost every certain scenario. So this is the game versus Milan. And in this game, we'll have to keep an eye on a couple of aspects that we just discussed on the tactical board. Let's play the clip first, and I will stop it as and when I need to. The first aspect, can you already see?
Yep.
Xavi loves his triangles, and these are not all the triangles that are on the pitch just now, but I wanted to highlight a couple of them or several of them just to show you the importance of them because they allow interconnectivity. They allow players options at all times. Again, Milan are pressing with one striker, as we said, which means the center-back duo is enough to establish the 2 versus 1 superiority. And this means that Barca can recycle play even without dropping players. But now, look at this. This is the third man sequence or the wall pass. A player drops, and there's a free man here, down there, center back. Barca access him. Again, third man sequence, Barca access the player. They recycle the play out wide. What happens next? We watch. Now, the side is overloaded, which means that the majority of players had to be pulled towards the left side of the pitch, which opens up the space on the right side, and Barca can switch play.
That's absolutely copybook.
The most important thing here is that this is robotic, almost robotic, because Barca do this almost every single game. Okay, we're back here in the second video. Again, the Milan game, let's see what we can see here from the aspects that we talked about. Again, Milan are pressing with one player, which allows Barcelona to have this 2 versus 1 advantage. Again, very similar thing. Only this time, you see that the center back can now run with the ball. And these are the deep carries that we talked about earlier. Barca carry the ball forward, which forces the opposition to collapse on that side. Again, you see that you wanted to know what's the antidote to this Barca approach. It's this man marking type of thing. Because look at the players. They all have their own markers, which means that this player in possession here cannot really and reliably and safely access any of his players that are close to him. So what Barca do in this instance, and this is a good example, they skip play. They go forward, they go long, and they gain territory. Now, this is important because now they're here. They have gained territory. They are on a much higher position now, but they're not forcing it. So the skip of the second phase was only used to gain territory. And now they reset. You see that they are now at the entrance of the final third. They are in the opposition's half, and they have achieved that through skipping play. This is a good example of skipping play. And it ends here. So Barca have skipped the phase in order to gain territory. That's a good way to combat the man marking if you can exploit that long pass, if you can exploit and win that second ball as well. This time we see an example from the Arsenal game. Again, we'll see similar things, but with a slightly different result. Barca will use their advantages. They will use Xavi's non-negotiables to progress play and even outplay the opposition in certain aspects, but with a very different result. Let's watch it. Again, 2 versus 1 and deep carries. This has become a staple. We can see the pattern repeating itself. Barca established the +1 and they carry the ball forward. What happens next? They recycle out wide. The opposition has to collapse. They have to move forward towards Pedri here on the ball. You can see the direction of their movement is all towards us, towards the left side. And you can see the direction of the press. So if Pedri goes back to the goalkeeper, Arsenal's players are already primed to follow the direction of the press. However, Pedri changes sides and Barca do the overload to isolate tactic successfully, and they change sides to the isolated side where there is much less marking going on. However, this is not changing sides and skipping play to regain that territory, to conquer territory. This is a bit of a forced verticality issue that we see because Barca keep attacking even though they are not ready to attack, which ends in a unsuccessful positional play. Now, this final clip is the Real Madrid clip. And I think everyone knows what sequence I'm going to show because it did around on Twitter. It went viral because Barca managed to string, I think it was almost 40 passes in a single sequence. They managed to show us that they are indeed capable of doing these highly systematic, structured, and very positional types of attacks and get the result. But what I want you to pay attention to is how they do it, what they do to accomplish that. We start here in Barca's half. The first thing, again, 2 types of superiorities. Both are numerical, but in different shapes. This is the 4 versus 3 box. So Barca have superiority here, but they also have a superiority in the back line, which means that they can progress play in 2 different ways. De Jong opts for a switch, which is absolutely fine because this is the free man that Xavi wants to have in every single situation, and Barca continue systematically progressing the ball. Notice that even if they are equally numbered or even outnumbered, they have the dynamic positional, dynamic superiority, meaning that they are quicker to access the space and exploit it. Again, superiority, recycle, go against the pressure, against the direction of the press. Again, here, they double up on the presser. He can now press both players at the same time. Mats can easily access one of them, and Barca continue. Let's watch the clip until the end. More superiorities. Sometimes it's dynamic, sometimes it's numerical, meaning that Barca either have more people around the ball or they just arrive at the space and in those positions, in those areas faster than the opposition, meaning they have this dynamic superiority. They are one step ahead of the opposition. And that is key for Xavi. Xavi is, in his mind, still very positional. He adheres to those rules of achieving and exploiting superiorities on the pitch. And this attack ends in, as we now know, a great strike from a distance from Oriol. Doesn't end in a goal, but doesn't matter. And again, Barca have skipped a phase. They have been very vertical, but they stop and they reset. They wait for their opportunities and then they strike. So it's not forced verticality, but it's verticality when and if it suits the team in that specific phase. It's just a glimpse of what's to come. And hopefully, what's to come is much, much bigger and better than we have seen so far.
Yeah, that's it. That was a glimpse of the preseason. We got to see a little bit of it. We'll get to know more as the weeks go by, and we are all excited about the season starting. So that's it from us today. We'll be back next week with a new one. Tune in to watch us.